Florida has always been a hotspot for strange sightings, unexplained phenomena, and bizarre creatures lurking just out of view. From the Everglades to the deep coastal waters, this subtropical state holds mysteries that have baffled scientists for decades. But what just emerged recently, something so unusual, so biologically perplexing, has stunned even the most seasoned researchers. It's not an exaggeration to say that this may redefine how we think about ecosystems, evolution, and even climate change itself. And it all began with a few scattered reports that quickly spiraled into a full-blown scientific investigation. It started quietly. A few hikers in the wetlands reported hearing eerie vocalizations that didn't match any known animal. These weren't the chirps of frogs or the calls of birds. They were low, almost mechanical-sounding tones that seemed to echo through the marsh like a deep underwater sonar pulse. At first, it was written off as natural environmental noise, until the sightings began. Multiple eyewitnesses described a creature with features never before documented in Florida. It moved through the water like a reptile, yet it had patches of fur. Its eyes glowed an unnatural shade of green when illuminated by flashlights. Some thought it might be a mutated species. Others believed it could be an undocumented invasive animal. But when the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission dispatched a team to investigate, what they found left them speechless. Deep in the marshes near Big Cypress National Preserve, researchers discovered tracks, massive, elongated prints unlike anything they had cataloged. The shape was semi-reptilian but had toe formations that were oddly primate-like. They set up trail cameras and left bait in key locations, hoping to capture footage of whatever was roaming the area. For days, nothing appeared. Then, on the seventh night, one of the cameras triggered. The blurry infrared footage showed a large, bipedal figure moving with surprising speed through the reeds. It was covered in what looked like matted hair, but its movements were smooth and cold-blooded, too fluid for a mammal, too coordinated for a reptile. The footage alone sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Experts from various disciplines were called in. Biologists, ecologists, zoologists, even cryptozoologists. The footage was analyzed frame by frame, and what they concluded was even more shocking than the sighting itself. Whatever this creature was, it didn't match any known classification. It seemed to possess hybrid traits: the temperature regulation of a reptile, the fur of a mammal, the vision of a predator, and the aquatic agility of an amphibian. The theory that began forming was almost too wild to be believed. Some scientists proposed that this may be a throwback species, an evolutionary remnant of an ancient line long thought extinct. There's a phenomenon in biology called evolutionary atavism, where dormant genes from ancient ancestors suddenly reactivate due to environmental triggers. Could climate change, habitat loss, or pollution have caused such a genetic hiccup in the local fauna? Could a regular swamp-dwelling species have spontaneously reverted into something more primitive, more ancient? As the investigation intensified, samples were taken from the site. Water, soil, and even bits of organic material found stuck to the trail camera casing were sent off for genetic analysis. What came back from the lab was enough to stop every conversation in the room. The DNA samples contained fragments that were similar to known species like alligators and manatees, but there were strands, whole sequences, that didn't match anything in global databases. These sequences weren't just unfamiliar, they were completely novel. Some bore similarities to extinct megafauna. One geneticist even joked, half seriously, that the unknown sequences reminded him of prehistoric marsupials and ancient aquatic reptiles from the Mesozoic era. The location was quickly secured and closed to the public under the guise of environmental preservation. The press was given a heavily redacted version of the events, something about water contamination and rare bird nesting. But inside closed doors, scientists were scrambling to figure out what had just been uncovered. Was this creature a one-off anomaly, the result of bizarre mutations in a single animal? Or was it part of a larger, hidden population, something that had survived, undetected, beneath the radar of modern science for centuries? To understand the implications, researchers began combing through historical records, folklore from Native American tribes, colonial-era journals, and even modern urban legends. And what they found painted a startling picture. Local Seminole stories speak of a water spirit called the Estikapkaki, often translated as the tall man of the swamp. Descriptions include glowing eyes, a humanoid gait, and the ability to disappear into the water without a trace. Early European settlers had reported strange creatures that were dismissed as misidentified alligators or large otters. But time and time again, the same details emerged: fur, reptilian features, and a low, throaty call that seemed to vibrate the air. Could it be that this creature or its ancestors had been around all along, living in the deep swamps, adapting, evolving, hiding in the places humans rarely venture? With Florida's dense wetlands and the rapidly disappearing natural habitats, it's entirely possible that entire populations of undocumented species could exist in isolation. The Everglades alone stretch over 1.5 million acres of subtropical wilderness, much of it virtually unexplored. Meanwhile, the mystery deepened when another sighting occurred, this time by a drone surveying land for real estate development miles away from the original location. The drone footage showed something large moving just beneath the surface of a shallow lake. The shape was consistent with the earlier trail cam footage: broad shoulders, a long torso, and a strangely jointed limb structure. It was moving just fast enough to kick up a small wake, yet with astonishing silence. When the footage was enhanced, the creature appeared to glance up at the drone, and its eyes reflected the same unnatural green glow. At this point, federal agencies became involved. Environmental Protection Agency specialists, military biological consultants, and representatives from NOAA began arriving at the site. That's when speculation reached a boiling point. Some began to wonder whether this was not a naturally evolved organism, but rather the result of a failed experiment. Was this the aftermath of illegal genetic modification? Had someone, somewhere, been tampering with wildlife DNA in secret? The idea sounds like science fiction, but history tells us that stranger things have happened. During the Cold War, secret experiments on animal behavior and biology were conducted in remote regions of the United States. Some declassified documents from the 1970s show attempts to crossbreed species for environmental monitoring or military use. Most of those programs were said to have failed or been discontinued. But what if something was left behind? Something that adapted to the environment, bred, evolved, and is now re-emerging. Even more disturbing were reports of sudden drops in local wildlife populations. Alligator nests abandoned. Fish schools disappearing overnight. Turtles found with unusual bite marks. Was this creature hunting the same food sources as apex predators, or was it pushing them out altogether? Biologists tracking the ecosystem noted rapid changes in behavior among birds and mammals, as if the entire food web was being reshuffled. And yet, through all the speculation, one thing remains certain. What has emerged in Florida is unlike anything ever documented before. The creature's origins, its biology, and its implications for science remain shrouded in mystery. But the clues are there, scattered like puzzle pieces in the wetlands, waiting to be pieced together by those bold enough to look. The search intensified as teams of biologists and ecologists expanded their investigation. Acoustic sensors were deployed to detect unfamiliar low-frequency calls, while heat-sensitive drones monitored the wetlands at night. What they found changed everything. Identical heat signatures and matching vocal patterns were recorded in multiple distant locations, far apart yet strangely synchronized. This wasn't a single animal, it was a population. That realization shocked everyone involved. If more than one of these creatures existed, it meant a breeding group had survived unnoticed, possibly for centuries. Equally astonishing was the creature's apparent intelligence. In one failed baiting attempt, researchers installed motion-triggered lights and trail cameras around a heavily monitored area. The trap was designed to lure the animal into a clearing. Yet, when they returned the next day, the bait was gone, the sensors untouched, and the camera wires had been carefully moved aside. One frame even showed what appeared to be a long, slender stick probing at the equipment, as if something was testing it for danger. It didn't seem random, it felt deliberate, and that deeply unsettled everyone. The idea began to spread. Was this creature sentient, or at least self-aware to an unusual degree? While it's rare, nature has produced several examples of high intelligence. Crows using tools, dolphins recognizing themselves in mirrors, octopuses solving puzzles. Could this species be another outlier? Something that evolved intelligence in isolation, in total secrecy? The evolutionary implications were staggering. Some began to theorize this might not be a completely new creature, but a relic of something far older. A biological echo from another epoch? Evolutionary throwbacks are known to occur, cases where dormant genes from ancient ancestors reactivate and express traits not seen in thousands or millions of years. In rare instances, snakes have been born with vestigial legs, chickens with teeth, whales with hind limbs. What if, under the right environmental pressures, a common swamp-dwelling species reawakened something ancient in its DNA? The theory gained traction when samples recovered from the creature's path revealed protein structures found in both reptiles and mammals. Yet again, parts of the sample didn't match any known species. They were entirely novel. These genetic anomalies were unlike anything cataloged in modern science. There were fragments that resembled extinct megafauna and ancient marsupial lines long thought wiped out. Something was hiding in the code, something that wasn't supposed to be there. More strange behavior followed. Reports came in of odd changes in wildlife patterns across central and southern Florida. Entire nests of alligators abandoned. Unusual migration behavior among herons. Fish populations displaced without explanation. In some areas, animals seemed to be actively avoiding certain marshes, as though something larger had taken their place at the top of the food chain. Sightings multiplied. One drone, scanning an inland lake near a protected sanctuary, recorded something massive gliding just beneath the surface. The silhouette matched earlier reports, broad-shouldered, long-limbed, and seemingly humanoid. The camera feed briefly caught a flash of the creature's face. Its eyes glinted, not with natural reflection, but a faint bioluminescent glow. More footage surfaced, from tourists and residents alike, each adding another piece to the puzzle. The creature, or creatures, weren't staying in one place anymore. They were moving, fast. Then came the turning point. A team of researchers conducting a late-night field test in a narrow waterway became stranded when their boat got caught in dense reeds. As they attempted to clear the blockage, they saw something rise slowly from the water. Towering over them, partially lit by the boat's spotlight, was a figure over 6 feet tall, covered in dark, matted fur with glistening skin underneath. Its face was unlike anything they'd ever seen. A fusion of traits, both ancient and intelligent. It didn't attack. It stood still, observing them silently. Then, with effortless grace, it sank back into the water and disappeared. The researchers returned visibly shaken. These were seasoned professionals, veterans of fieldwork in the Amazon, Arctic, and African jungles. Yet they described the encounter as overwhelming, not because of aggression or fear, but because of an uncanny sensation they couldn't explain. They didn't feel threatened. They felt studied. Video footage from the expedition was compromised. It showed the outline of the creature briefly, but then static and strange distortions corrupted the image. The audio picked up a high-pitched whine, followed by interference. Several experts speculated about possible electromagnetic interference, perhaps caused by the creature itself. Could it generate fields to disrupt electronics? A defense mechanism to remain hidden in a surveillance-saturated world? Soon, theories began swirling about potential origins. One posited that this wasn't a natural creature at all, but the result of human experimentation. Decades-old military research into gene editing, hybridization, and biological surveillance systems came under scrutiny. Projects supposedly long abandoned. Could something have survived and escaped into the wild? A lab-born organism, forced to adapt, now reclaiming a place in the natural world? But not everyone believed it was artificial. Some insisted it was simply nature doing what it always does, adapting, changing, evolving in response to the planet's shifting balance. With rising sea levels, pollution, and ecosystem collapse, species are under extreme pressure. Perhaps this creature was the answer to that stress. A new form of life, forged in the crucible of environmental chaos. Even stranger, Native American folklore began resurfacing in scientific discussions. The Seminole and Miccosukee tribes have ancient stories of swamp spirits and protectors, beings said to live in the deepest untouched parts of the land. Described as silent watchers, sometimes protectors, sometimes omens, their traits eerily resemble the recent sightings. Had the stories been misinterpreted myths, or were they ancestral memories of encounters with something real? At this point, public awareness couldn't be contained. Despite government efforts to downplay the situation, the story had reached global audiences. Social media exploded with speculation. Amateur cryptozoologists set out on expeditions. The area became a hotspot for night vision gear, thermal drones, and podcast live streams. But professional researchers remained cautious, not because they feared ridicule, but because they knew what was at stake. If this species is real, and if it possesses even a fraction of the intelligence or adaptability it appears to, then capturing one could risk irreparable harm. Not just to the creature, but to the balance of the ecosystem that may have formed around it. Scientists were beginning to understand that this wasn't just a rare animal. It was possibly a keystone species, an organism so influential to its environment that its removal could collapse entire food chains. And the final twist came from an unexpected source. A satellite image taken for agricultural mapping revealed an area deep in the marshes where the water temperature was several degrees warmer than its surroundings. Not just by a little, but significantly. When ground teams visited the location, they discovered a complex pattern of underwater channels and nesting sites, arranged in geometric shapes, not random, purposeful. It was the strongest evidence yet that these creatures had developed social behaviors, perhaps even rudimentary structures. The implications were staggering, not just for biology but for our understanding of sentience itself. If these creatures were building, coordinating, and learning to avoid human detection, then what we've uncovered is not simply a new species, it's a new intelligence. One that has evolved completely apart from us, one that has chosen the swamps of Florida as its sanctuary. And perhaps, just maybe, it has been there all along. Watching, waiting, hiding in the shadows of our ignorance, a ghost of nature's forgotten genius, finally stepping forward in a world that's too busy to notice. Until now.